Okay, we are live. I hope so, anyway. Um, all right, like Joe said, and like the invitation said, this is going to be a class on basic Windows internals and performance monitoring. Something that will take you many, many years to perfect because I always heard that performance tuning was more of an art than a science, and it really, really is. Not only do the counters mean different things, but they're collected different ways, and they change from every version of Windows to every version of Windows, and we'll see a little bit of that today. And then interpreting the numbers is very difficult as well. You know, it's like being a doctor a lot of times. You know, you've got to chase down medications and you know, different lifestyles and what's going on here and what does this history do and what did this do to his body and so on. I mean, it's all the same thing, right? It's very, very difficult. So to start off, I want to start off with just a little bit of Task Manager and its related entities. I actually have to set something up here real quick because I've got my Task Manager linked to Process Explorer from Sysinternals, which is an excellent tool that we won't really get into today because that's out of the scope of what we're doing. So let me kill that, and then now when I bring up Task Manager, now you've got Task Manager. Okay, so Task Manager, everybody's familiar with Task Manager, right? I mean, everybody's gone in here to see their systems and their memory usage and their CPU, and you know that you can click on here and get it sorted by usage, right? And everybody knows that you can come in here and see the running applications and kill those applications and whatnot. And you've got a performance tab that you can see overall usage, and all these guys down here are misleading at best. So, you know, again, that's another class altogether. And then you can see some basic networking stats. And that stuff is actually pretty cool, but there's another way to do this that I like because you can hit different systems. Okay, if you do this from the command line, a lot of people don't know this. Even experienced admins don't really know that there are command line tools for doing the same thing that actually have a lot more functionality as far as being able to control processes, and they allow you to connect to remote boxes and see processes from there as well. So if you take a very simple, and I think I have a paper that I've put together on this, but I'll just show you through the basic. If you just pull up a simple task list, you will get the exact same default view out of here that you got out of Task Manager. And I can expand this, right? And that's cool. You can pipe all this stuff to a table. You can pipe it to a CSV and load it into a database, or load it into some other program for parsing and do your will with it, right? It's actually pretty cool. You can do some pretty cool stuff with it that I won't actually show you examples of later, but we'll talk about it when we start getting into the Perfmon stuff, okay? And now I forgot what other examples I have, so I'm going to have to very quickly retreat to my notes, which I should have had open already. I know. Let's see. We got this guy here, and it should be in here today. There we go. And task list. There we go. Okay, so basic task list is right there. One thing that you'll notice about the Task Manager right away, if we come back in here, is you see, let me sort it by name. There we go. You see all this SVC host, okay? And a lot of people don't know what that is. What that is it's a service host, okay? Windows takes services, like services, and groups them together under one execution agent that it calls a service host, okay? And you see all of these service hosts. Well, the problem that you find is, how do I know, let's say that this guy were spiking 80% of the CPU, how do I know what's inside of this service host, right? Because right now we don't have, inside of Task Manager, we don't have any kind of view whatsoever into the services that are comprised inside this service host, right? Well, we can solve that pretty easily by getting rid of Task Manager. And you can expand the services and say task list space service, And now, when I come here and I see this service host, I can see all of the services that are running inside of that particular service host, and I know which service host to kill, or which one to at least concentrate my efforts on.
Is that the process ID, the second column?
Yes. Yes.
What does it come in?
Task list /SVC for service. Right there. Because that's, it's the service host, so you're wanting to find the services. So it just expands the services in that service host. And I'm amazed always at how many experienced admins, 10 and 15 years, have never played with this and don't know what's possible to do, right? You can do some other pretty cool stuff with it as well. You can find DLLs by processes, okay? So you've got here, /m will find all the processes that are using a particular DLL. So, for instance, if you're trying to delete a DLL from the server, which happens more often than not, with actual system admins, you find yourself trying to unload a program that's giving you problems or do an upgrade with something, and you keep getting an error that you can't do it because this one DLL is being used by another program, right? Or maybe you're trying to delete an application that you uninstalled a couple weeks ago, and you go, well, I'll go ahead in there and clean up this directory, right? So you go in that directory, you highlight the folder, you hit delete, and it crawls through all the things, and it gets to one DLL and says, this DLL can't be deleted because it's being locked by another program. Everybody's done that, right? Well, you got a couple different things you can do, right? You can reboot the box and hope it doesn't reload on startup, but you have no idea because you don't know which program is actually holding that, why it's holding the lock, right? So by doing this, and this isn't a runnable example, I don't think I've got anything using this, but by doing the /m and then giving it a DLL name, you could find all the processes that have that DLL loaded, and then you could go through there and start killing those processes, and then you can delete your DLL and start them back up again if you need to.
What's the M stand for?
Module. Because the DLL is a module that it has loaded. So that's pretty cool. And again, that's something that's and where that really comes in handy. I mean, the situation I just outlined is a good one, but where that really comes in handy is chasing down malware and viruses and Trojans and the like, right? Where you've got a miscellaneous DLL loaded on your system that you suspect very highly is causing whatever order of malfeasance in your system, right? And you can't unload it because it's being locked by something inside a program that you have no idea. It could be buried 600 directories down because those guys do that, right? And you need to know where it is. You need to know what's holding it. So, if you've got a suspicious DLL, then yeah, you can come in here and find out what's locking it and then kill it. So, good stuff. And this one is also one of my favorite, the FO, which is a filter. And I'm not really going to, I put this here just as a reminder, but the filter, you can filter tasks by name or partial name. So you could say, anything that starts with, SVC star, and you would get only the service host or something like that, right? And the format, of course, you can format it as a table, as a list, or as a CSV, which is very useful, right? Being able to format that as a CSV and pipe it to a text file, and then you can load it in Excel and look at it. You can have another program loaded up and parse through it and do kill commands based off of it and stuff like that. So it's really interesting that, if you wanted to keep a user from being able to run a program, or to keep somebody from being able to run a program for very long, you could set up a Windows job that every minute you go out and check for certain processes and kill them. And yeah, they'll start up the program and it'll run for a minute, and then it'll be shut down and there's nothing they can do about it. You're running with, complete admin rights, right? And that really brings us to this next set, Taskkill. And these are both native Windows commands. I didn't have to download anything special for them, right? So you can run Taskkill and kill something by process ID. So this guy right here, all of these guys right here are the process IDs, all these numbers that you see. So if you had something in here that you wanted to kill, I don't see anything that SQL writer I could kill, 296. So I could come in here and say 296, and let's hope I just didn't drop that down. Right? And then if I come up here and say task list, oops, enter, not F5, then SQL writer should be gone.
It said access denied.
Did it say access denied?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad, because I'm really glad, because that shows one of the main things that I wanted to show you here is there are a lot of processes. This is why we have two separate things, right? I didn't read that. Good. Taskkill is very low level. There are a lot of things that you actually can't kill using it. Okay, there are a lot of processes that take extended privileges to be able to kill. Okay, and the program just doesn't have the rights to do it, which is why we have Taskkill. So we have Taskkill, and we have Taskkill right here. Oh, one more thing on Taskkill. You can kill it by process ID or by process name. So, which you can see automatically that it's, if you can use the other one to kill anything, then why would you use Taskkill? And the other one is actually more robust.
So, quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Service host is actually a grouping of various services.
Right.
That grouping only gets one process ID.
Exactly. If you kill that service host, you will kill everything inside of there.
Okay.
Yeah. So this image name is what you're looking at here. And I call this an image name because they call it an image name because Taskkill calls it an image name. Okay? Here it's called a process name. But in Taskkill, it's called an image name. So that's what I'm going to call it. So all you have to do, if you wanted to kill the aclient.exe right here, you would just kill a client, leave off the exe, and just go with the friendly name, and it'll kill it for you, assuming that everything is good and all the stars align up and everything. Now, Taskkill is a little bit more robust, okay? For one thing, you say Taskkill/im, which is the image, and then you give it the name of the image, and /f means force. Okay? So I should be able to come in here and say Taskkill/im and it's not found. What did I... Is it still there? Where is it? Do we see it? SQL writer. I think this one wants...
296, is that what it was?
do this. I think this one might want the exe. Yeah, there we go. So that one wants the exe. So that's the actual image name right there. Is it wants what's actually in that column. So you can see I can kill stuff with this that I can't kill with Taskkill. Yes.
I'm asking a lot of questions here. When you're using the GUI to end a process, is it doing a Taskkill or Taskkill?
It's doing a Taskkill because there are plenty of things in the GUI that you can't force, that you can come in here to Taskkill and you can force.
So why would you use a TSKkill or TSKkill?
Well, it's a level.
Why don't you just go directly into Taskkill?
I really don't know because I use Taskkill when I do it. Because anything I want to kill, I want to force, so I'll kill it. Now it does have the force on there. If you do it without the force, then it will protect you from killing things. A lot of times, it protects you from killing what it considers essential services, right? So if you were to come in here and try to kill LSASS, right, which is the security provider, where is it? There it is, right? If you're going to try to kill this guy right here, it wouldn't let you kill it. But if you use Taskkill/f, it'll let you kill it. But then you got to reboot Windows. I mean, it'll shut down Windows. So, a lot of times it'll protect you from it. Now, Taskkill will let you do it. It's going to let you try to be smarter than, too good for yourself, right? But it will let you do it. And so there are lots of things that you can do here. You can kill by SPID. You can kill by status, which is actually pretty cool, because you can set up another Windows job to go through and do a task kill and kill anything with the status of not responding. So you can keep programs from hanging. If you've got, God forbid, 9 programs hung, right? You can go in there and kill them with all one fell swoop and just bam, right? And then, of course, you've got your filters here. You can kill by names or by partial names. And FI is filter, and then where the status equals not responding, and that little EQ means equals instead of putting the actual equal in there. So this is the actual command you would type in there. Like I said, we're not going to go through all of them because I don't feel like going through and finding things that I can kill in different ways on my box. You can kill anything that has the modules, that has certain DLLs loaded, certain modules loaded. So if 5 programs have this thing loaded into space, say it's an Office DLL, and you want to kill all the Office applications that have it, kill everything that's using that. You can kill anything that you can sort by memory. You can kill anything that is using over, 40 megs of memory, or anything that's, or you can combine them. You can. This is a good one. You can kill an image that doesn't equal Explorer, because Explorer is like your main Windows interface, right? Your main Windows environment that's using more than 40 megs of memory. So keep Explorer open because that's Windows.
That works as an and, not an or.
Right. And kill anything except that's using more than 40 megs of memory. And of course you can set that to whatever you want and so on. But you've got a lot of options there, and these aren't even all the options. These are just a few prime examples that I chose that are pretty cool to give you a good example of Taskkill. So if you wanted to come in here, and of course the same rules apply, right? I mean, if I come in here, you can see all the options and play with them till your heart's content. And this is well documented. You have but to search the web for cool and interesting ways to use Taskkill and TSkill, and I didn't find too much on the differences between them on what the actual physical internal difference is as to why TSkill won't kill certain things and Taskkill will. But I think Task Manager actually runs somewhere in between them, because I can kill SQLwriter from here, but I can't kill LSASS from here. So, all right, or LSASS as we call it. But so it runs somewhere in between there, and those are your command line options for monitoring and for looking at and killing tasks. And like I said, on all of these, I can connect to a separate box and start killing tasks and looking at processes on other boxes, which is a really cool, lightweight, if you know how to type, it can be a really cool, lightweight way to connect to another box, look at the things, bam, 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 yes, this process is hung, kill it, and then go on about your business. And even write a batch file to do it. You can write a batch file and that's another class altogether, right, on writing batch files. But you can write a batch file that all you have to do is pass it in a parameter of a machine name, and it'll connect to that machine and do whatever you tell it to do, and then go on about it, right? You can pass in a dozen parameters. You can, if you wanted to kill by status, right here, then you can pass in the machine name and the status that you wanted to build, and then do string building like that, and you could get pretty rich with it. I mean, it's pretty cool. And I can't confirm this, but I think a lot of the tools that do stuff like this remotely just tap into these real simple commands. While a lot of these tools are, $1,000 to $10,000 a box, and sometimes $1,500 a CPU to manage processes remotely. When it's something simple, you could do like this and wrap a simple GUI around it and do it yourself in just a very short time. It's quite unimpressive when you see how some of this stuff is done behind the scenes. You're like, that's it? Right? And when you get into the Sysinternals Tools, which again is another class altogether, start seeing the stuff that they'll give you for free, and you can deploy that stuff across all the boxes, yeah, it becomes very trivial to manage things and to run processes remotely and all of that stuff. It's very trivial. So it's good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff there. And the Sysinternals tools especially are an industry standard #1 because absolutely everybody uses them. If you don't know Sysinternals, then go to Sysinternals. You really should replace Task Manager with Process Explorer because it gives you so much more functionality, and it's just a richer program altogether.
Sysinternals?
Yeah, Sysinternals.com. They actually they got absorbed by Microsoft a few years ago. I'd say within the last 5 years, and they've got phenomenal tools. They've just got dozens and dozens of tools for managing memory and disks and heaps and just everything you would ever want, right? Managing startup programs. Their startup program manager is one of the best there is. Auto Run and Auto Run S are some of the absolute best ones there are because they search a lot of those hidden registry locations that that startup programs like to hide in, and you can search anything and find and keep anything from running that you need to. So they've got phenomenal tools, and they're all extremely stable, and they have regular releases even after all this time, and they've always been 100% free. Pretty cool. One of my favorite ones is PS Exec, that will allow you to open up a command shell to a remote box and run any program you want. That actually saved me one time at home. Somehow I managed to lose my domain admin password, and I was able to connect to that box through PS Exec and change the password because I wasn't able to get in through TS. And with NetUser, you don't have to know the current password. You just change it. So I was able to change it remotely on that box and get back into my account. It's an amazing set of tools. You can do some incredible stuff.
It's scary stuff.
Yeah, scary stuff. Yeah. To think that this stuff is out there, and they've got ERD Commander as well, which is a bootable GUI that you can boot your server to it, and before you even you don't have to have an admin password. You don't have to have any credentials on that box whatsoever. You can boot the server to it and change admin passwords. You can shut down services. You can start services. You can kill services. You can almost anything you can do in Windows you can do at the boot before Windows boots from a GUI without any credentials whatsoever. It's pretty scary stuff. If they have access to the box, I can get ERD Commander and then just you're sunk. But that saved me a couple times too, so I'm not going to complain. I'm all for people giving me enough rope to hang myself, right? Okay, so now we're going to get into performance counter, into Perfmon and Perfmon logs. Now, Perfmon, some people call it System Monitor from the old days. And it's just up here in Admin Tools and Performance, and it's actually called Performance Monitor, but absolutely everybody on the planet calls it Perfmon. Because that's the name of the EXE. It's Perfmon EXE, so everybody calls it Perfmon. Why nobody calls Outlook? Oh, look, I don't know, but because they take all the vowels out of the end. Anyway, so is everybody at least familiar? Has everybody seen this? Does everybody know what this is and what I'm talking about here?
Seen it.
You've seen it? Okay. Performance counters. What this does is this measures what we call performance counters on your box. Okay? And performance counters are merely metrics of the time it takes for your system to do certain things, right? Or metrics of certain aspects of your system. So here, the most common one right here, you've got percent processor time, right? So this tells you right here, and you can highlight this right there. So if you've got 4,000 of these things in here, you can highlight it and see which one you're looking at. So this right here tells you, what your current CPU utilization is. I mean, that's pretty simple, right? This one tells you right here what your average disk queue is. You can see I'm pretty low right now. And this tells you how many pages per second. To add a counter, you simply hit that plus, and on my box you wait for 5 minutes, and then the counters come up. Now again, yeah. And then again, you can select counters from computers across the network, and you can select counters. Like you could say, if you wanted to watch two systems that were involved in each other, say the dashboard web server and the dashboard database, right? You could look at a set of CPU, memory, and disk counters on one box and CPU, memory, and disk counters on another box in the same window here. And then you could sit there and monitor all of these things and see, oh, well, I see this made a request, and when this request is made, then this spikes up and does a thing, right? So you can do stuff like that. Not necessarily at the request level, but if you're doing the request, then you know the request shot up, and you can see what the request does to the CPU on both boxes, right? Maybe it's a high CPU on this box, which causes a high disk load on this box, or something like that, right? So that's what the disk counters are, or that's how they're implemented. What they actually are is they're actually contained. The definitions of these guys is contained in INI files in various places on the drive, right? And then those INI files refer to .h files, which the programmers in here know are just C++ header files, okay? And these guys have drivers that sit behind them and tell them how to monitor the system performance. And we'll look at some of that for the disk performance, right? So these guys just sit there and they're counters. They count things as they come across, right? So it's like in SIS when you have the row count transform sitting between two things, right? It just sits there and counts rows and puts it in a variable as they come across. So as you've got disk reads or disk writes, these things just sit there and count them as they come across, and then they present them to you. And they actually store these things in the registry, okay? So if you wanted to look at your counter files, and I'll close that for now. Now, the three big counters that we're going to look at are, actually I'm getting ahead of myself. Hold on, let me go back in there. I actually wanted to come here and talk about how to set up performance traces, okay? We're going to work backwards. We're going to work from the top level on basically what counters are, and then we're going to work on how to set them up and how to use them to monitor, and then we're going to kind of dig into the specifics.
How much history of matrix can you see in this?
In Perfmon?
Yeah.
Well, it's instantaneous, right? So inside Perfmon itself,
Go back in history.
yes, if you save it to a log. And that's what we're talking about right now. Okay? Yeah, forget going to look at it. I mean, Perfmon is just a few minutes, okay? But if you wanted to save a history and actually go back and see what happened last night, it's just like SQL Profiler, right? You have to set it up in advance. It's always collecting the counters, but it's not always saving the counters, okay? So there's something wrong with me seeing the performance logs on this box. So I will retreat to my lab and show you the counters there. And one more time. Yeah, I know that. Okay. So this one should have plenty of counters on there. And this is my I'm clearly on XP here, and I was probably messing with something a couple days ago while preparing for this class and messed something up in my perf logs. But on your servers, this is what you will see. Okay? Now, you've got counter logs here, and that's exactly what you're looking for. And there's a default counter log here that has a system overview that I very rarely do anything with. But when you open it up, you can set up whatever counters and whatever objects you need to. Now, for objects, you're going to get the entire subset. And you'll see what I mean in a minute, okay? counters is where you're going to go most of the time, and you're going to set up just whatever counter that you want. Now you see all of these under processor? If you choose, and this is the object, right? So if you're under here, and you choose object, and you choose processor, you're going to get, by default, all of those counters under processor. So it's like selecting every single one of them, right? You're automatically saying you want all of them. And trust me, you don't want all of them. We're talking thousands of counters here, not for processor, but if you went in and chose all the objects, you'd be getting thousands of objects. So here you're gonna pick and choose. For main system maintenance, we're gonna talk about the ones today that you're gonna choose, okay? And that's out of the scope of what we're gonna talk about right this second. But as you go through here and pick these, you'll pick processor, you'll pick some server stuff, you'll pick some SQL stuff, right? And then when you're finished with that, now one more thing right here, you've got some explain text down here that if you hit explain, it'll tell you what the counter does. So if you're looking at a counter and you're not quite sure what it does, this will tell you what it does. Sometimes. It doesn't always give you an accurate portrayal of what the counters do, and we'll actually look at a good example of that later on. I know, everything is later on, but I tend to get ahead of myself, right? So once you get all these, you can set the interval there. So you want to, by default, it samples data every 15 seconds. For a good baseline, there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually pretty cool. And then you can set it for seconds, minutes, hours, days. I mean, to take a CPU reading every 15 days, kind of worthless, but I'm glad they put it in there anyway, right? You can set different credentials to run it under. So if I personally don't want it running under my account because, I'm setting this up for you because it's my last 2 weeks, then, we'll set it up as a generic account, and then it'll at least keep running after they disable my password, right? Log files, this is pretty important. The binary file, we were talking a couple minutes ago about being able to replay these. I said that in Perfmon, you can only see a few minutes at a time, right? If you save this as a binary file, you can go back and replay those files. You can load them up into Perfmon and then go back and look at them later. Then you've got different flavors of text file, right? You got comma delimited, tab delimited, SQL database, which is SQL database is just what it says. It will automatically log it to a SQL database, and I'm glad it does that instead of an ODBC compliant database, but it would be nice if they did. But if you choose a SQL database, you can choose a database anywhere in your network, and I highly advise that you don't, because that's an extreme performance hit on your system to have to wait for the database transactions to complete, because it's going to give you this nice little small normalized table structure. It's not going to be a big thing. It'll be a nice little normalized data structure, and it'll do it very nice. And you can go in there and you can log several, all of your systems. You could log to a single database and have a central reporting repository for all of your performance. But then you'll need it because your performance is going to tank because of it, right? But you could go in there and do the joins and everything, and you could write your queries, and you could write a whole application around that. But you really shouldn't. Everybody uses one of these text files, and they usually use comma. I use comma delimited myself. Once you choose this, you hit configure. You can tell it where to put them, what to name it, and the size limit. And once it reaches the max size, it'll just start another one. So you don't have a 20 gig file out there that you have to push across the network and load into Excel, right? Or load into the database. So
What's that circular?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what the circular one was? The binary circular?
Yes, that means that it'll keep a fixed size, and it'll just keep truncating off. It'll keep overriding as it goes, right? So then you can schedule it. You can schedule start and stop times. And if you have an unlimited file here, so if I'm in here and I have max limit, which is huge, right? And I want these guys to be named by the day, then I would go in here and I would forego the scheduling, and I would go into the command line version of this guy right here, and I would set up a schedule. I would set up a batch file, and set up a schedule to run that at 11:59 I would stop the trace, and at 12 I would start, and at 12:01 I would start the trace, and that would give me new files for every single day, so I could easily segregate my files. Do you understand what I'm talking about? And this is how performance monitoring is done. I call it the poor man's monitoring, right? Because you're not buying MOM or NetIQ or any of that stuff, and NetIQ isn't even this sophisticated. So you can get a lot done with stuff like this. This is very, very easy to do. Anybody can come in here, and the counters are fairly low weight. To write these counters to a text file sitting on your drive is fairly trivial. It really doesn't add much overhead. Not the overhead waiting on SQL transactions would take, right? Because they're just little numbers, just pushes those across. And then you've got command line programs that you can use to read them as well. And you can load them with SIS packages into a database, and then that's all she wrote from there, right? You can wrap SRS reports around it, and you can get performance reports in this nice little system that you've got. But you got to recreate it for every single thing, right? Now, something that's really cool is the save settings as, and I love this because if you set up your counters generically enough, okay? And by generically enough, I mean, see, I have to go back in there again. I mean, when you add these counters, if you're not looking for anything specific, say this were a 16 CPU box, right? And I take the total, then that's going to take the total of all of the CPUs on that box. Whereas if I want to break down and I put each individual CPU in there, okay, that's another story. But I would take the total, because when you come in here and do a save as, you can save this as an HTML, and then you can do a load from on another box. So if you set this up correctly, and you do your memory counters, and you do your total CPU and your total disk queue, and you don't separate it out into each individual logical disk, you get the totals, then you can set up one single trace and ship it to all of your boxes relatively easily. And then you don't have to keep configuring these things again. And then you know for a fact that when you use your SIS package and dump everything into one single place, that they're all in the exact same format, they're all looking at the exact same thing, and the CPU total will be the total of all 16 CPUs, or all 4 CPUs, or both CPUs, or all 32 CPUs, right? And then if you need drill down further on to see, which CPUs are being taxed, then you can do that. But just for a general architecture, an overview architecture of what your systems are doing, you can save this as an HTML, copy that HTML to another box, and then load it from the HTML, and you're beautiful. If you go in there, it's just regular HTML. I think you'd have to do a mass search and replace on the machine name, right? Because it'll hard code the machine name in here. So you just take the new server name and do a Control H and do a replace on that machine name, and you're good to go. And then you do that for every single system, and that's beautiful, man. I mean, you can set up these traces all day long, give them different names and everything. So alerts are kind of the same thing, except you tell it which counter to look for and what the alert condition is, and it'll do what you tell it to do based off of that alert condition. So if you say the CPU stays up too high, stays above 95% for 5 minutes, do this, right? And this is what I was telling you before with the Taskkill, right? If you get an alert here, then you can say, you can set the alert to run a batch file, and that batch file would be kill anything that has a CPU of 95 or over, or you could capture that process ID, and then you could send it to there, and then you could say kill this process ID or kill this task. So you could get some pretty cool stuff in here based off of these alerts, right? So, you can do some cool stuff, and it's a couple different steps in there. I mean, you have to kind of to think your way through it, which is what a lot of these programs do, right? They've already thought all this stuff out for you. That's why they're charging, $20,000 for the server and then $1,500 a CPU after that for monitoring your systems, because they've already thought all this stuff out. But when you do an alert, you say new alert settings, and let's say mine. You can give it a comment. You can add counters. So I can say the processor time, let's add that, is over or under 95. Sample data every so many seconds. Right? And then of course you'd have to interpret that. I mean, you can get more sophisticated with it than we're going to get here. And then here's the action. Send a message. Now this is pretty cool. This is one of the things I really like. Is let's take Kim's problem that we had with BOE a while back, right? And this is one of the things that I talked her through. I don't know if she ever actually did it, but this is one of the things I talked her through. Is every morning about the same time we have a performance problem on the BOE server, right? I mean, and it just tanks, okay? And remember, the default interval for collecting these things is 15 seconds, which is fine for baselines, but for trouble conditions, you want a lot finer grain. Maybe you want to see it every single second, bam, 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 right? So if you have a noticeable counter, say every single time her condition happens, her CPU shoots up to 99%, right? So you set up a log condition in here that says, boom, when the CPU hits 99%, then start this performance log that collects data every second. And this is a performance log that you would already have saved on there, right? And then you can set up another one that says, when the CPU drops below this, then run this batch file that will turn that counter log back off, and it goes back to the default 15 seconds, right? Or you can just run a program every single time that'll say stop the 15-second counter log and start the second counter log. Then when it drops again, stop the second counter log and restart the 15-second counter log. So you can get really fine grained and cool stuff, and never even and you can get the stuff that you need, the fine grained stuff that you need, without having to touch it. Maybe this other counter log has a lot more stats to it. Maybe your 15-second baseline counter log that you run all the time only has the top 5 or 10 stats counters on it, right? And the one that you want to run during a problem condition, maybe it'll have 30, because you never know what you're going to run into, right? Maybe you want to dig into monitoring a specific process during that time, which you can do, right? You can monitor a specific process and see exactly what that specific process is doing. So maybe we want to see exactly what BOE is doing, or maybe exactly what all the other things are doing. If you go to processes and hit all, like we did on CPU, you'll get every single program CPU usage on that box, and then you can see exactly which one is spiking. That's collecting all of that and writing all that to a file is a little bit more intensive than just the top 10 that you had before, right? But during a problem condition, to gather that stuff is worth it.
Right.
And then you go back, as soon as it drops back down, then you go back to doing what you were doing before. So pretty cool stuff. And this is poor man's performance monitoring, and it takes some time to set up and get your thresholds set up the way you want it and everything. But if you're under budget and you don't have, God, last time we had at my last job, the mom guys come out and quote us, give us a quote for our environment. It was in the 200K range, and IBM Tivoli, forget it. I mean, it started at 500K for our enterprise, and yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, HP OpenView, same thing. Those guys are just expensive. You can find cheaper ones. If you have to have a package, go with Nagios. It's open source, and it's very well documented and very rich. It's a nice monitoring program. Beats the hell out of NetIQ, that's for sure. I'm sorry?
Anything would beat the heck out of NetIQ.
Yeah. Okay, so those are Perfmon basics and monitoring and scheduling, right? I meant to actually set up a schedule so that you could see it, and I just kind of well, I forgot, but I ran out of time. That's it. But really, there's nothing to it. It's just you go to the command line and you start the trace, and then you stop the trace, and you do those on certain schedules, and you flip them when, you know. But I like to do mine. I like to set up one at midnight that stops the trace and then restarts it, so I can have a separate log for every single day. So it's really easy to keep track of them that way, you know. And then when you load them into the database through Perfmon, through SIS, you can wrap your SQL, your SRS reports around it, and you've got a nice little reporting infrastructure there. It's good stuff. Let's see where I am here. Okay, this is the tough one. I'm going to kind of jump ahead here because it doesn't really matter what order we do this in. And we're going to talk about troubleshooting some counter issues and how to load counters. And it'll give you a really good feel for what the counters actually are. And then we're going to actually talk about some specific counters. Okay? So there are times when you go to look at some Perfmon counters and you say you want to see some of the system counters, and they're just flat out gone. They're not showing up in Perfmon at all. And it happens more with third-party counters. I've had this problem in the past quite a bit with SQL counters, where I would come in here and I've got all these SQL counters here, and they would just be gone. And I would have somebody say, and I would have my remote site call and say, and this is exactly how it happens. I get the call from the remote site, Sean, we're having trouble with our SQL box. Performance is horrible. Okay, I'll hop on and take a look. I hop on and go to take a look, and I got nothing. Well, how can I take a look now?
All those things are gone?
All those things are gone, right? How can I take a look now? I don't have any counters to look at. And this is your only view. This is like the data warehouse to our OLTP system, right? It's the only look we have inside of there to see what's actually going on. Without this, you can do nothing. There's a way to do it from within SQL. There's a table that you can hit inside of SQL to get SQL's counters, but guess what? If these aren't loaded, those aren't collecting. They'll all be 0. So it all starts here, right? So there are third-party counters that you can use. I mean, everybody loads their own counters. Oracle loads some counters. SQL loads counters. ASP loads counters. Hyperion may load counters. I don't know, but they may. They're certainly able to, right? So anybody can load performance counters on your box if they want to. And these things will sometimes crap out on you. And you need to know where they come from and how to do it, and sometimes how to completely reset the system counters to begin with, right? So we're going to start with a very, very simple. Well, no. Okay, I'll start with a full reload, because the simple one I actually have to reboot the box for. So the first thing that you check when you do this is whether or not you have the appropriate permissions in the registry. Okay, so you'll go to HKey local machine. You can see I've been messing with Lightspeed here. Software, Microsoft Windows. I don't expect you to remember this because I don't. I'm reading it. Microsoft Windows. Even when I was doing this, even when I had this particular problem 3 times a week at one location or another at my last job, I still couldn't remember this. Every single time I had to do it. Yeah, it is. I can't remember the simplest counters. I mean, the simplest registry hives. It's just ridiculous. Let me make sure, because I've gotten off track somewhere. Software. Microsoft. Oh, okay. There we go. Windows current version. And then we just expand into everything, right? And then we're supposed to be in Windows NT current version. Perflab. And then 009. Ah, we made it. Okay. You need to make sure that you have full access to this, that your account has full access to this. And so I would just give it full access to the Windows NT, right? But you just go into permissions, and then you just start. So I would make sure that the admins have full rights to this. You personally probably don't have to have full rights to it, but you may, right? So just check your permissions here. That's, I would say, about 70% of the time the cause. Okay. After that, if you don't have full rights to that, give yourself full rights, and then guess what? Reboot the box. It didn't used to be that way. They used to say, all the docs used to say that you had to reboot the box every time you changed something on the counters, but I didn't find it necessary. My counters would always show up right away. But now on this particular system right here, I haven't tried on all systems that are patched with SP2 for Windows 03, but on this one I'm having to reboot it every time I do something. It's like, right? So you're going to have to reboot to get the logs to show back up. Now, assuming that's okay, you're going to have to reload your counters from the Windows CD, and this is just, and I've got this here. I think I've got this loaded in here. Of course I don't. And I'm doing this. Oh, fine, be that way. I don't think I can do that either. No, fine. Well, I had it loaded yesterday, and it should be ready to go, but it's not. I don't know why I can't get to it now. But I don't have a DVD drive in this box, so I have to do it from across the network. But if you go to the Windows i386 directory, you can pull a couple of the DAT files off of there and replace the DAT files here in System 32. Hello. There we go. And Windows System 32. Keep going. There it is. And for the system counters, or for the system counter files, you're looking for perfc009.dat and perf-h009.dat. And I'm sure you guys don't want me to actually go into these thousands of files and find them, right? And if you just change those to .old, just in case, because it's always good practice, and then just drag the DA underscore files of the same name off of the Windows CD, those are compressed files, it'll decompress them, and that'll rebuild your counters. Now the fun part comes now. Because now that you've replaced all of these, you get to reload them, and if you don't reload them correctly, you will wipe out all of your third-party drivers, all of your third-party counters, and you have to go through there and reload them all. And I know. And okay, so here.
So what reasons do they give for the counters being corrupted in the first place?
I suspect, okay, because I don't know that I've ever seen a reason for it, but I suspect what could happen is when you load, sometimes when you load third-party software. Now we're talking about the system counters, right? Not the third-party counters, but the system counters. I suspect that some vendors may try to replace them with their own versions, and that's a corrupt counter now because something isn't done right, something isn't compatible with your exact with your exact Windows version level, and I suspect that that's one of the things that could corrupt it. Other than that, I have no idea. I know the guy, Mark Friedman, at Microsoft. He's on the Visual Studio team now, but he's the guy that did a lot of the original documentation on a lot of these counters for the resource kit. And I'll ping him and see if he has any insight into that, which he may. That's a good question. That's actually, yeah, I was talking to him actually earlier this week. So next time I ping him, I'll just say, hey, dude, how does this happen? And because how does any file ever get corrupted, right? I mean, whenever you see any corrupt system file, how does it ever happen? So the answers are the same, right? Whatever causes this is what's causing the other ones. And the reasons are probably so various and sundry, it's, right? And we probably wouldn't even understand the answer if they gave it to us. So, where am I here? And there's, if anybody really wants to know how to completely load the counters, I'll give you the exact steps. Because then after you load these counters in here, then you have to go in and into the registry, and you have to change a couple of the registry values. And I've got it written out here, and I was going to do it, but it's really kind of pointless, isn't it? I'll just send you the doc if you want it. Okay, it's not that big a deal. But the thing that is important, and that we're about to get into, and this is some more cool command line stuff, is the question comes: what counters are even loaded on the box, right? Because that's a biggie. And what you have to do is you have to go into. Let me adjust these windows a little bit. I want this guy more over there. There we go. Is you have to go into the System32 directory. Why does that keep going away like that? Stop that. Fine. But I'll bring it down here. I should be able to drop that into there. It's not. What are you doing? Why aren't you staying on top like you're supposed to?
Oh, you get your remote location completely goes over it.
Oh, do I? It's fine. I didn't want to have to do this, but I will. Okay. Well, officially, if you grab onto this folder here and turn it into a hand and hold down and drag it into a DOS window, it'll copy the location. I don't know how many people know that, but it's a cool little trick, especially when you've got something 6 miles long, right? So if you come in here and you do and I've done this 1,000 times and I can't remember the syntax right now. Oh, there it is. Find string. Because remember I told you that all these definitions were just stored in INI files. So if you're in the System32 folder, you can see all of the drivers, all of the counters here that are loaded, right? And you can see what they're called here. So I've got one for ASP, one for IIS, NetInfo, remote access, NTDS, which is the big one that has a lot of your stuff in there, MSMQ, which is message queue, MSDTC. Here's your web stuff. Here's your TS stuff. So you can see all the counters that are loaded in there, and you can go into each one of these INI files and look at which ones are loaded. Now you can't, and look at the individual counters that it loads. Now you can't look at the definitions of what they're actually doing, because that's inside the H files, right? I mean, and those are compiled and you can't see those. But inside the INI files, it's actually pretty cool because it shows all of the explain text in there. And many years ago, I went through there with some of the more difficult ones, and I created what I called learning counters, and I included full explanations for all of the explain text on a lot of the SQL counters, and then you could load that on your system. And when junior admins come in and they hit explain, they'll get my big, long, drawn-out explanation instead of the little short, terse explanation that this one gives. That's no more informative than just guessing by the name, right? A lot of times, because they don't tell you how they relate together, they don't tell you how the collection is done, they don't tell you anything. All they tell you is, this counter does this. Well, I could infer that from the name. Come on, tell me what this counter does, But yeah, inside those INI files, you can go in there and change the explain text and everything. So, not and everything. You can change the explain text, and if you change other stuff, you'll probably break it. But anyway, so these are the ones that are loaded. Now, I can't stress this enough. These are the system counters that are loaded. You notice there are no SQL counters in here? That's because you have to go to the SQL bin folder to get the SQL counters that are loaded. Okay? You can't do this. You absolutely cannot do this and get all of the third-party counters from the System32 folder unless they drop their counters in the System32 folder. Okay? So, but you've got something pretty cool. You can get all of the counters on the box and save them. And I've got that here somewhere. I had that somewhere. Oh, I know what it is. Never mind. I don't have to do that. Now, let's say that you don't have these counters loaded. That you want to, that you fixed your permissions problems with, say, your SQL counters, and now you want to load the counters into memory, right? You do a load counter, and then the full path to the INI file. And I had fully planned on doing this for you, but I really don't feel like sitting there and typing the SQL path, and since I can't drag that down there, but it would be something like colon backslash da 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 backslash da 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 backslash. That's what it would look like. Okay, and then you hit enter, and it'll load the counters. Okay, a really cool thing that you can do.
So SQL counter is already there, right? So what are you doing here? We are trying to load it into the system counter? Or?
No, if I were to load, if I would load the SQL counters if the SQL counters were gone,
Oh, okay.
and I didn't have them. Let's say that I just replaced all of these counters like we just did, and I need to load my SQL counters now, right? Now, there is a way that you can shotgun this even for third-party counters, okay? Because all this information is in the registry, and it's actually under the services hive, okay? Now, I know it's under the services hive, but don't ask me where the services hive is. I will have to actually find that. But I know it's under the services hive, right? Now, if I come here and do this and get a help on this guy, I will see two interesting things, and actually the only two interesting things. And you notice again how I've got a computer name right here, right? So the first one is /s, and that is case sensitive. It has to be a capital S. What that's going to do is that's going to save all of the counter information for every single counter, third party and otherwise, on the box into a single file. That's actually pretty cool. I like that. And if you want to load that from then you do a /r, which is a restore from that file name. So if periodically you want to come through here and set something up to do this to, once a month or so, I don't know anybody that does. I'm just, speaking, right? Like if you knew beforehand that you were going to start messing with these counters, if you wanted to put them all in a single file and reload them, right? And that's a what if. You can reload them just with a should reload all of your counters. Okay? And I'm not going to do this because I did this last night on this box and it took in the neighborhood of 10 minutes.
Just from the System 32 though, right?
No, this will reload all of them. This will reload all of them, even the third-party counters. But if you do a load counter from here, then you have to load them individually, right? By this name, by the driver name. So I would say load ASP, load ESENT, and so on. But if I do a /r, it'll reload all of my third-party counters. Okay. Now, if I don't want any of the counters collected, I can also unload counters. Okay. And what do you think that program is called? Right? And it follows the same convention as the other one. You just give it a full path name. Or no, I'm sorry. You don't give it a full path name. You give it the counter name, the driver name up here. So I would unload W3SVC, and it would unload W3SVC. Okay? And that one you don't have to reboot for. You can unload stuff all day long, right? It's reloading it that you have to reboot. So that's the basics of loading and unloading counters, and there's a couple little intricacies in there that we didn't cover, but again, if you need to do it, come to me. I got a couple places I can send you. I got the notes I took here, and there's an excellent KB article that tells you exactly how to do it, step by step by step by step. If you absolutely end up having to load and unload counters one day, then and that link is a good one to keep in your links anyway, right? Because you never know when you're going to log onto a box and go, where the hell are my counters? So, okay. So that's a really good intro to what counters are and how to work with them, and so on. Now I think we are into, yes, we are into disk counters. We're gonna spend some time on disk here because disk is not only extremely important but extremely misunderstood. The disk counters are some of the hardest counters to wrap your mind around, and there's quite a bit of voodoo that has been propagated about the disk counters that I hope to alleviate today. And I'm probably going to do a pretty good job since this recording is actually going to go up on the internet on my website. Then I hope that thousands and thousands of people will see this and stop propagating these very ugly myths about the disk counters. Now, I'll stress here that we're not really concerned as much in all of these counters, not just the disk counters, but in all of these counters, we're not really concerned as much with what the proper values are, what they should be. Okay? You don't have to know, you don't have to look at a cache counter or a CPU counter or, you know, some other vague, you know, virtual counter or some disk counter to know and know what it should be in a perfect world. You need to know what it should be on this system. You need to know what's normal for your system, okay? So if your system normally has a disk queue of 70, okay, and say that the industry standard says that, you know, a disk queue should never go over 15. Now these are just, for example, these are not the real numbers, and we'll talk about the real numbers soon. It doesn't matter that that the industry says the counter should only be 15, that you should only have a queue of 15. Normally, under baseline conditions, when everything's running smoothly, your system has a disk queue of 70. That's normal. That's all you need to worry about when it comes time to troubleshooting your disk queues, right? So now if you have a disk queue of 700, okay, I'm out of whack for anybody, right? But especially for me, right? I normally run 70, now I'm running 700. That's a problem. Who cares what the industry is, you know? There is no industry standard for CPU. You know, nobody says that your CPU should be this. What does your CPU normally run? That's what you need, right? And that's why when some of you guys come to me and say, you know, we're out of memory on this box, or this box is using high CPU, I say, okay, what is it normally? Well, I don't know. Well, then it's not high. If you don't know what it normally is, then it's not high now, because we have nothing to go by. I can go by saying, okay, 97% is a full workload. I mean, it's definitely busy, but is that a high CPU for this box? Right? Nobody knows until we pull a baseline. And we typically here in this group don't really have those baselines. We don't really even have ready access to those baselines. I don't even know if NetIQ is pulling those baselines. What kind of history? Well, yeah, we do. Remember, we asked them that last year, and they're only keeping like a couple days of history. Yeah. So effectively, we have no baselines because, you know, I mean, we could implement one of these Perfmon solutions and collect our own baselines in a database somewhere, but, you know, that's an effort we have to actually do and get a server for, and right now it would go on history, and that's just, I know how you feel about that. So I can't stress that enough, that baselines, you have no performance troubleshooting without baselines. If you don't know what the system is supposed to be, then you don't know when it's out of whack. Fair enough? And I don't care what the industry says. I care what my box says. Okay? So with that in mind, okay, we talked about baselines. Okay, before Server 03, and we're talking about disk counters now, right? Disk counters were optional. If you look at Windows 2000 and NT4, in NT4, both disk counters, the logical and the physical, were turned off by default. And if you look at Windows 2000, the physical disk counters were turned on and the logical disk counters were turned off. Okay, Now, does everybody know the difference between a physical and a logical disk? Because that's important here. If you don't, there's no shame in it. Raise your hand and I'll explain it. Okay. A physical disk is an actual physical spindle. The hard drive that you would actually get, that you would buy from the store and plug into your computer, that is a physical disk, right? Something you can touch, okay? A logical disk is taking that and separating that into different partitions. So on that drive, say you bought a terabyte drive, right? You can separate that into C and D, being 500 apiece or 750 and 250 or whatnot, right? So those are your logical disk partitions, and you need a different set of counters to monitor that, because if you just monitor, if you've got an application, or if you've got a physical disk that's split into 2 different partitions, or 5 partitions, right? And you're looking at your physical disk counters, you're going to see that that physical disk has a disk queue of, say, 400. But from which partition is it coming from, right? And that matters when you're separating applications onto different partitions. That's going to tell you which one is giving you the trouble, right? So the logical counters are very important versus the physical counters. And if anybody ever did any admin in Windows 2000, you remember having to go on there, and it's always that huge pain in the ass, right? You get that same phone call. Sean, we have performance problems, and you log onto the box and you try to, and they've got their disks segregated into logical disks, and you go in there and all of your counters turn out to be 0 because you don't have the logical disk counters installed. So you have to go to the command line and type in diskperf/yv and then reboot, in which case that'll probably fix whatever performance problem you had anyway. But you can't collect those disk counters until you enable diskperf, which diskperf back then was really just, let's call it a driver that sat on top of the disk stack and just counted things as they went through, counted things in both directions as they went through, okay? And if something was destined for the D, then it went to D. And the physical disk is no different, right? It's a different driver as well. It's a .sys file that sits out there and just counts I/O requests and whatnot, and it's just a counter. It sits there and it collects a time. It collects basically an enter and out and a time, right? And in, out. It just logs the time every single time, and that's all it does. And then it just pushes those numbers to you. So we don't have to do that anymore. That stuff is turned on automatically in Server 03, and you actually can't turn them off. Because they're just integral, you know. In the old days, you had a lot of, these things got kind of a bad rap because you had a lot of admins that refused to turn the disk counters on. Because they were turned off by default, they thought that meant that they were turned off because it was a huge performance hit on the system to turn them on. And so they refused to turn them on because, well, if I'm already having system problems, why am I going to turn on the counters and make it even worse? It's so negligible, it's not even worth it. I mean, I don't know why they didn't turn the counters on by default. I'd have to talk to somebody who's probably not even there anymore. And he probably wouldn't even remember why I did it now anyway. But that was an NT3 decision. But now that problem's gone away. I mean, they have no choice. The counters are on, shut up and use them, right? And there's not anybody out there now who would even argue that disk counters are a bad idea anyway. So, now, if you look at, and I've got kind of a thing here. Here it is. My little disk stat diagram that some of y'all saw me putting together just this morning. This is how this whole thing works. You go through here, all the disk requests go through ntfs.sys, and this is inside the IO manager, right? IO manager is just like a collection of files more than it is an actual thing, right? And you go through the volume manager, the physical disk manager, you go through the disk drivers, then you go through the SCSI interface. Finally, you hit the disk, and then you go back up the chain to fulfill the request, right? So it comes down here. Say it's a read request. The read request comes down here, it reads it, then it sends the information back up here, right? Well, you've got part manager, partition manager.sys, that sits here and collects the physical disk stats, but not until after it goes through dmio.sys to get the logical disk stats. So it just counts both of these all the way up, and it just sits there and just collects these ticks. It's a very simple thing, so it doesn't add much to your system at all.
So if you got a logical drive that's a FAT32, is it FAT32.sys or is it board?
I don't know why the name of it would change. It's probably got as in NTFS.sys. I really don't know. I haven't done anything, even my home systems, on FAT32 in 10 years. I've been on NTFS forever. I really don't know.
Just curious.
Yeah. That would be something to look up, though. It doesn't sound like that would be too hard to find. I don't know. It's possible, because there are enough differences between FAT32 and NTFS that, and I'm not really up on FAT32 anymore, but it's possible that a lot of these aren't even available on FAT32. I mean, it's considered such a home system that, why would you need, deep level discounters for stuff like that? So I don't know, to answer your question very succinctly. But you're right, it probably wouldn't be NTFS.sys. But it may be. I don't know. Okay. So anyway, that's what the disk stack looks like. That's what that's called, the disk stack. And then there's, this receives its requests from something else. I think it's called the IRS manager. But don't quote me on that. So with that, there are 9 direct discounters that get measured. And these guys...
Okay, can we pause here for a second? Because we're scheduled to finish that.
Yeah, record you.
And for the internet users here, we've decided that we've run out of time, and we're going to continue this in 2 weeks. So I'm going to go ahead and post this section, and then in 2 weeks when we do the rest of the presentation, then I'll go ahead and post that too.